We really were meant to be friends.
I guess you were, yes.
So, are they gonna remember any of this?
No, I'll wipe out their whole day. It'll be like it never happened.
Wow. Hey, what's going on over there?
With that, let's bring in our leadoff panel. David Fahrenthold, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Times. He's covered the Trump family and its business interests. Catherine Christian, former assistant district attorney at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. She's now an MSNBC legal analyst. And Anthony Coley, former Justice Department spokesperson under Attorney General Merrick Garland. Thank you all for being here. David, how big is this decision when it comes to Trump's bottom line and the way he presents himself as a master businessman?
Well, I mean, to the bottom line, to the cash flow situation now, this decision, if it's upheld on appeal, will have the potential to wipe out all the ready cash that we know that he has. Now, that your listeners, your viewers shouldn't think, okay, Donald Trump's going to be walking down the Fifth Avenue with a barrel instead of clothes in the next few days. He's still got a lot of properties. He still has a stock market vehicle, this Trump Truth Social, that they can eventually pull cash out of. He's going to survive he's not going to go broke. But the business that we know of, the business that sort of brought him to prominence, that brought him to the White House, could really be shrunk. It could really change. It could just be sort of a holding company for a few assets where Trump likes to visit. It's already shrinking, and this will just shrink it further. You mentioned about his reputation, too. I think people that still believe that Trump was this incredible, successful businessman, that he made this sort of whole business out of nothing, this really shows that he built that business by lying to people. The judge says he built this business by defrauding even his lenders, by lying about tiny little things like how big his own apartment was. That was just sort of the lifeblood of the Trump organization, was deceiving.
And Catherine, Trump and his attorney had already said they plan to appeal. But the question is, will this stand up on appeal, this judgment?
I think so. Many people were saying, what's taking the judge so long? And now we know why. 92 pages, very detailed. The judge went through the reasoning why he found the Trump organization, Donald Trump and his sons, liable for falsifying business records, for issuing false financial statements, for conspiring to commit insurance fraud. So the judge was very detailed about why he didn't credit the testimony of these so-called experts. He said that they denied reality. The judge was very detailed why he was issuing, it's not a fine, it's called disgorgement, which is basically the wrongdoers have to give back their ill-gotten gains. And he said it's because the court intends to protect the financial marketplace and the public as a whole by this decision, because Donald Trump, his co-defendants, refused to admit any error. And in the judge's viewpoint, that means they will continue to engage in this fraudulent activity. This family business now has to report to an independent monitor and now has a director of compliance is installed there. That's going to drive them nuts. And it is a statement, as the Attorney General James said, regular people can't lie to get mortgages or credit cards. So why should Donald Trump and his sons do that?
You know, Anthony, some thought we might see a harsher punishment. I mean, all the things that Catherine was just talking about, plus the dollar amount, seemed kind of harsh to me. But what likely went into the judge's decision here?
So I think he was really trying to make sure that the judgment in this case withstood an appeal. But I want to be very clear here. Trump should be breathing a sigh of relief. As harsh as this penalty is, I mean, the judge could have ordered the entire Trump organization to be dissolved. The court could have ordered Trump to be banned for life for what he did in this case. The judge didn't do that here. But stepping back for a second, this really feels like we have entered a new season of accountability, Jonathan. I think back over what's happened over the last several weeks, this E. Jean Carroll verdict, he owes her $88 million. I think about what happened just yesterday. We now know that Donald Trump will face criminal trial within the next 6 weeks. And then, of course, you've got this massive judgment here that strikes at the heart of who Donald Trump purports to be. And we now know, as David was saying, that this entire brand was built on a foundation of lies and one of cheating.
And we know this is the reason why he was actually in a courtroom he didn't really need to be in, because this strikes at his very core, how he views himself. You know, David, I'm going to pick up up on some of the things that Catherine was talking about. It's not just a big fine. Trump's companies are banned from applying for loans at any New York financial institutions for 3 years. And as Catherine pointed out, an independent monitor will continue to oversee the company's financial deals. How much of an impact will that have on how Trump conducts business?
Potentially a lot. You have to remember, this is a really, really small company run by a few family members and a few sort of lackeys beholden to them. It had been a very small core for so long. To now have an outsider, a non-family member, and an outsider of the Trump organization in the middle of it, asking questions, asking what they're doing, it's already disrupted their operations. It's already brought a lot of sunlight to this very dark corner of the business world. So I think it will continue to have a huge impact on them, in addition to the impact that's going to be brought by the need to find the cash for this judgment.
Anthony, let me come back to you because, I'm sorry, David, were you saying more?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Anthony, Trump made it even more clear in his remarks tonight that he's basically going to run against the legal system during his campaign, which he's already been doing, attacking judges and attorneys general, while also using the legal system to his advantage to try to delay things and try to work his will over the legal system. You just said a moment ago that we've entered into a new terrain where he's being held accountable. That is the way he's talking tonight. Is he still as dangerous today as he was before all these judgments started coming?
Oh, absolutely so. I think Trump understands and he's embracing the fact that the road to the White House goes through the courthouse. We see him leaning into that, and we see this, to your point, reflected in his language, right? He talks, he doesn't take responsibility for having any of the charges that he's now facing and why they are brought about, right? But he's positioning himself as a victim. He says publicly, I'm getting indicted because of you, not for anything that I've done, that they're really after you. And I think what we're going to see happen over the course over the next several months and weeks as this campaign really heats up is Trump trying to use the court of public opinion to influence what happens inside the court of law. Reminder to your viewers, he only needs one juror, one, to say not guilty. And then while that's going on, he's going to continue to try to delay these cases, hoping that he can somehow get to the White House and get out of these charges, all of them.
You know, time flies when you're having a lot of fun talking with all the with my panel and all these big cases. I'm going to jump ahead because in the 3 minutes that we have left, we've got to talk about Georgia. And we have to talk about yesterday's hearings and today's hearings. Catherine, the hearing got a lot of attention, including from people who usually don't watch a televised court hearing. What have you made of these last 2 days of testimony? First with DA Fani Willis and what she had to say on the stand, and then today, her father taking the stand.
I have to say, it's really sad because you have this highly respected DA, clearly experienced, expert in RICO, and a major case, one of the biggest case in the country. And she and her father are there publicly and having to talk about, quite frankly, her sex life. Now, having said that, the DA, you know, and I have respect for her, opened the door to this. As soon as the relationship with Mr. Wade became much more than professional, he should have been removed from the trial team. That does not mean that she should be disqualified from the case. I do not believe she should be, nor do I think the court will remove her from the case, because so far the defense attorneys have not shown that there's an actual conflict of interest or that the defendants in some way are going to be denied a fair trial. But it is clearly an unforced error, and it's an appearance of impropriety. That does not mean she should be disqualified.
Anthony, you wrote a column saying Fani Willis's testimony at least partially restored your faith in her. Explain.
Well, she had to really reassert control over the narrative and not just rescue her reputation, but rebut these lies and this innuendo that we've seen come against her so forcefully. Now, I will say, I'm not going to repeat what Catherine just said, but I want to put what's happening, Jonathan, in context. What's really going on right now is an offensive play by the defendants to muddy up this district attorney and to undermine faith in the underlying case against Donald Trump in his efforts to overturn the Georgia election. And I would remind your viewers, this case has already resulted in 4 guilty pleas. In her relationship with Nathan Wade, as ill-advised as it was, has nothing to do with Donald Trump's efforts to try to steal an election.
Well, since this network and other news organizations called the presidential election on Saturday, November 7th, 2020, every day of Donald Trump's life has been worse than the day before. Today is $464 million worse than yesterday for Donald Trump and his children. There was no suspense, really, in today's judicial finding in the civil fraud case brought against Donald Trump by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Jury verdicts are always suspenseful. You never know what juries are thinking, but it was always very clear what the fact finder in this case, Judge Arthur Engoron, was thinking. It was very clear what any reasonable person would think when confronted with the evidence in this case. In his ruling today, which cost Donald Trump and his children $463.9 million, including interest, Judge Engoron wrote, in order to borrow more and at lower rates, defendants submitted blatantly false financial data to the accountants, resulting in fraudulent financial statements. When confronted at trial with the statements, defendants, fact and expert witnesses simply denied reality, and defendants failed to accept responsibility or to impose internal controls to prevent future recurrences. That's the essence of the case. So, as of tonight, because of Donald Trump's stupidity and recklessness as a businessman, and because of Donald Trump's utter depravity in raping E. Jean Carroll in the 1990s, Donald Trump owes a total of $551 million in legally enforceable judgments against him in the state of New York. And the interest is ticking on that total amount every day that it remains unpaid. That means the interest on what Donald Trump owes, in this case, won by Attorney General Letitia James, and in the cases, the 2 cases, one by E. Jean Carroll, is increasing at a rate of $1 million per week. That's the interest right now that's running on what Donald Trump owes in all of these cases, $1 million a week. To appeal those cases in the state of New York, Donald Trump has to literally put up or shut up. He has to put up the money in question in order to appeal the New York cases. So Donald Trump has exactly 22 days left before he must deposit the $83 million that he owes E. Jean Carroll in an account controlled by the court so that he can appeal that case. If he loses that appeal, that $83 million immediately goes to E. Jean Carroll. She won't have to chase Donald Trump for the money. Donald Trump has already deposited the $5 million in an account controlled by the court while he is appealing the first verdict against E. Jean Carroll that E. Jean Carroll won in court. Donald Trump has 30 days to deposit $463 million in an account controlled by the court so that he can appeal this business fraud case. Tonight, Donald Trump needs the kind of $2 billion surge of Saudi money into his business that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, got from the Saudis after the Trump presidency. If foreign sources of money like that don't bail out Donald Trump, it is unlikely that the Trump businesses will experience a surge of income that is able to absorb the $500 million in legal judgments that Donald Trump now faces with hundreds of millions of dollars in legal judgments likely to land on him in the lawsuits pending against him in Washington, D.C., filed by police officers for the injuries that they suffered at the hands of the violent Trump mob on January 6th. Donald Trump will be barred from running businesses in the state of New York for 3 years. His two children, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, will be barred from running businesses in New York for 2 years. After crushing the Trump boys and their business in court today, New York Attorney General Letitia James said this.
I want to be clear. White-collar financial fraud is not a victimless crime. When the powerful break the law and take more than their fair share, there are fewer resources available for working people, small businesses, and families. And everyday Americans cannot lie to a bank about how much money they have in order to get a mortgage to buy a home, or a loan to keep their business afloat, or to send their child to college. And if they did, our government would throw the book at them. I want to thank the entire incredible and hardworking team in my office that tried this case, because the scale and the scope of Donald Trump's fraud is staggering. And so too is his ego and his belief that the rules do not apply to him. Today, we are holding Donald Trump accountable. We are holding him accountable for lying, cheating, and a lack of contrition, and for flouting the rules that all of us must play by. Because there cannot be different rules for different people in this country, and former presidents are no exception. This decision is a massive victory for every American who believes in that simple but fundamental pillar of our democracy, that the rule of law applies to all of us, equally, fairly, and justly. Thank you.
The second day of the hearing in Fulton County, Georgia, about the Trump co-defendants' motion to disqualify District Attorney Fani Willis from the case began as Andrew Weissman predicted it would begin. Because Fani Willis's lawyer decided not to ask her any more questions, that meant that the Trump team of lawyers did not get another chance to ask questions of Fani Willis, and so she gave no more testimony today. Andrew Weissman predicted that would happen because it appeared from the Fani Willis side of the case yesterday that she had established everything she needed to establish in that testimony yesterday, and there was no reason to continue it. Then Fani Willis's lawyer called two witnesses in support of her testimony. The first witness was the former governor of Georgia, Roy Barnes, who was is a highly experienced trial lawyer. He impressed everyone in the courtroom on both sides. He testified that Fani Willis offered him the job of special prosecutor in charge of the case against Donald Trump and his co-defendants. His testimony refuted the Trump team lawyer's claim that Fani Willis hired her boyfriend, Nathan Wade, for the job of special prosecutor so that she could then go on vacation trips with Nathan Wade and profit from his spending on her through the paycheck that she was giving him. That is the Trump team lawyer's theory of the case. Now that the testimony in the hearing is over, we can say that there was absolutely no evidence presented at all that Fani Willis intended to profit from Nathan Wade's position or that she incidentally profited from that position in any way. Zero evidence for the fundamental reason that this hearing was held. Fani Willis and Nathan Wade both testified that their romantic relationship began after Nathan Wade began working in the district attorney's office. Here was former Governor Barnes' testimony about why he didn't want the job of special prosecutor that eventually went to Nathan Wade. He didn't want to be the special prosecutor of the man who tried to overturn the presidential election in Georgia and sent a violent mob to attack the Capitol on January 6th.
I'd lived with bodyguards for 4 years, and I didn't like it. and I wasn't going to live with bodyguards for the rest of my life.
So the terrorism of Donald Trump and his mobs worked in that particular instance. There was shocking testimony in the late afternoon today when Terrence Bradley, who was Nathan Wade's law partner and was the first lawyer involved in handling Nathan Wade's divorce, took the witness stand and testified that he did have communication